My name is Eudora Wynn, 72 years old, retired teacher, widow of a man who believed a calm voice could mend anything. I've spent my life keeping peace between students, neighbors, and lately, between my son and his wife, under this same old roof. It was Sunday evening in Savannah, the kind of night when the cicadas hum just beyond the windows and the air tastes faintly of salt from the river. The dining table, polished oak and scarred with years of family dinners, gleamed beneath the soft light. I'd set the dishes myself: roast chicken, buttered corn, Morel's favorite cornbread. It felt almost normal. Keaton sat across from me, tie loosened, his hand resting on Morel's. She was glowing in that way. Expectant mothers do: beautiful, impatient, fragile, for a moment. Watching them whisper to each other, I felt proud. I thought maybe this would be one of those peaceful evenings we'd talk about names for the baby or the garden fence that still needed mending. Then Keaton cleared his throat. His voice was casual, almost rehearsed. "Mom," he said, "we've been talking, and we've decided we'll turn your room into the nursery. It's the biggest one, and it's right next to the bathroom, perfect for the baby." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. "My room?" I asked, the words barely above a whisper. Morel smiled. Too quickly. "It's just practical. Eudora, you could move into the back guest room. It's cozy." Before I could respond, Keaton's voice hardened. "Mom, this isn't up for debate. Either agree or start looking for another place to stay." The sound of silverware stopped. Even the clock in the hallway seemed to hold its breath. I looked at my son, the same boy who once built pillow forts in that room, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder when storms frightened him. His face was unfamiliar now, older, sharper, tired. I felt something inside me go very still. I didn't argue. I simply laid my fork down, folded my napkin, and smiled. By the time I stood to clear the plates, my decision was already forming quiet, certain, and far stronger than their voices. After they went upstairs that night, I stayed behind in the dining room, the scent of roasted chicken still clinging to the air. The dishes waited in silence, but I couldn't bring myself to wash them. Instead, I drifted through the house, letting my fingertips trail across the walls that had once held our lives together. This house had been mine and Leon's dream, a creaking Victorian with chipped shutters and a magnolia tree out front that bloomed so wide in spring it perfumed the whole block. We bought it the year Keaton was born. Leon used to read poetry aloud in the parlor while I rocked the baby by the fire. After he passed, the house became my anchor, something solid when everything else blurred with grief. I stopped at the doorway of Keaton's old room. The faded wallpaper still showed the outline where his bookshelf once stood. I remembered him at 12, sprawled across the floor, reading aloud lines of Frost he didn't yet understand, but loved the sound of. Later, as a teenager, he'd paint model airplanes at that same desk while I graded papers. It was the only room in the house that never frightened me during storms. The hum of his radio had always made it feel alive. When Leon died, I kept this house standing with 2 jobs and late nights, paying the mortgage one small check at a time. I never let the bank touch it. When Keaton married, I wanted him close. So I let them move in. "It's your home too," I'd told him. But I never meant it literally, at least not like this. I passed the hall mirror and caught my reflection, older, thinner, eyes dimmed but steady. The papers in my drawer still list this place under my name, yet it feels like I'm trespassing now. A ghost haunting her own kitchen, upstairs. A floorboard creaked his step, familiar even after 40 years. I pressed my hand against the wall, feeling the heartbeat of the house I'd built, and wondered how something so full of love could make me feel so unseen. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the lace curtains and spilled across the kitchen floor. I moved slowly, the ache in my chest heavier than the stiffness in my knees. The house was quiet, too quiet for a home that once pulsed with laughter and late-night stories. Upstairs, I heard Morel humming softly, the tune muffled by the creak of floorboards. Somewhere behind that sound was the echo of last night's words. I brewed my coffee, let it cool untouched, and sat by the window that faced the magnolia tree. Its branches were bare now, waiting for spring, but a few stubborn leaves still clung to the highest limb. They trembled in the wind, but didn't fall. I took that as a sign. There would be no confrontation, no raised voices, no accusations. I'd spent a lifetime teaching others to listen before they spoke. It seemed I would need to take my own advice. Silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. In the small drawer of the writing desk, I found an old stack of receipts and letters. Tucked between them was a cream-colored business card with embossed letters, Wynn Chase, Realtor, Historic Savannah Properties. I remembered her from a year ago when she helped my neighbor sell the cottage across the street. She had a calm voice, the kind that made you believe the future could still be kind. I turned the card over in my hand, tracing the faded ink of her number. That evening, I opened one of Leon's old poetry books, the same one that used to sit by his armchair. A folded slip of paper slid out, his handwriting still strong and deliberate. Don't let anyone make you small in your own home. I read it twice, then a third time. The words settled into me, steady as breath. This wasn't about pride or even hurt. It was about space, the kind you carry inside, the kind no one should take from you. I slipped the note into my pocket and picked up the phone. By Tuesday afternoon, I found myself sitting at a small cafe overlooking the Savannah River, the winter sun flickering off the water like shards of glass. The place was nearly empty, just the scent of roasted beans and the low murmur of conversation from the barista behind the counter. Across from me sat Wynn Chase, her posture relaxed but her eyes alert, the kind that noticed everything without intruding. I wasn't sure you'd remember me, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. She smiled. It's hard to forget someone who used to bring magnolia blossoms to her neighbors. How are you, Ms. Wynn? There was kindness in her tone, but not pity. That made it easier to speak. I told her about the dinner, the ultimatum, the quiet afterward that had settled over my house like dust. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply said the words as they were. Wynn nodded, listening the way a good reader listens to poetry carefully, between the lines. When I finished, she opened her planner and glanced up. There's a property you might want to see. It's just across the street from your place, a small cottage, renovated last spring. The owner's moving out of state and just lowered the price. If you're serious, we can move fast. The words across the street landed softly, but carried weight. I pictured standing on my porch, looking out at peace instead of tension, light instead of shame. The next morning, I followed Wynn through the front gate of the cottage. The air smelled of pine and new paint. It was smaller than my house, but bright sunlight spilled across the wooden floors, and the windows framed the same magnolia tree from a different angle. There was room for my books, my teapot, and the quiet I'd been missing. I'll take it, I said, surprising even myself. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and withdrew Leon's old investment bonds, the ones I'd never touched. The clerk looked at me curiously when I signed the forms. It's time, I told her. And for the first time in years, I felt like the ground beneath me truly belonged to me again. The next few days moved in slow, deliberate motions, like turning the pages of a book I already knew by heart. I started with the small things: kitchen drawers, shelves lined with keepsakes, corners that held the dust of decades. I packed quietly. No announcements. No explanations. Each object seemed to weigh more than its size, heavy with memory. In the closet, I found my wedding dress folded in an old cedar chest. The lace had yellowed with time, fragile as breath, but when I touched it, I could still hear the music from that night: Leon's laughter, the clinking of glasses, the warmth of a hand that promised forever. I placed it gently in a box marked Keep. On a higher shelf sat Keaton's baby shoes, tiny white leather scuffed at the toes. I held them a long time, remembering the mornings I'd chase him down the hallway, his steps quick and unsteady. Back then, his laughter filled every room, and I never imagined a day when silence would replace it. At the desk, Leon's fountain pen lay where I'd left it, capped neatly beside a stack of old tax papers. The ink inside had long dried, but his touch still lingered in the grooves of its barrel. I slid it into my pocket, the way people keep talismans when they're stepping into something unknown. When the boxes were taped and labeled, I turned to the wall by the front door. There, just beneath the light switch, hung the small brass hook Leon had installed our first Christmas here. He'd engraved one word into its curve: home. I unscrewed it carefully and held it in my palm. Love built this house, I whispered, but boundaries will keep me standing. By dawn, the truck was loaded. I left a letter on the kitchen counter, folded once. No anger in its lines, only gratitude and a final blessing. Then I locked the door, slipped the key into the envelope, and stepped outside, feeling the cool Savannah air greet me like an old friend. A week later, the air smelled faintly of jasmine drifting in from the river. I had settled into the cottage, bare walls, half unpacked boxes, but the quiet suited me. That morning, I sent Keaton a message. Come by for coffee. We should talk. They arrived just after noon. Morel carried a nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes, while Keaton looked uncertain, like a man walking into a room he once owned, but no longer recognized. I had set the table simply: 2 cups, a plate of butter cookies, and a folder placed neatly between us. We spoke of nothing at first: the weather, the doctor's appointment, the magnolia tree that had begun to bud early this year. I could feel Keaton's impatience under the surface, the same restlessness Leon used to have when something didn't go his way. Finally, I opened the folder and slid a document across the table. You wanted my room, I said quietly. You can have it. I've already moved there. Morel blinked, following my gesture toward the window. From the kitchen, the view of my new cottage stood clear, the white shutters catching the sunlight, the blue curtains swaying softly. Her hands froze around her cup. What do you mean you moved there? Keaton asked, his voice low, strained. I bought it last week, I said. The cottage across the street. It suits me better. Less space to dust, more light for my reading. He stared at me, color rising in his cheeks. Morel opened her mouth but couldn't find words. The silence stretched between us, delicate and final. I reached for my cup and smiled. You have the house now, I said gently. All of it. I wish you both peace and space to grow. They left soon after, the sound of the front door clicking shut behind them. Through the window, I watched them stand on the porch, speaking in hushed tones. Across the street, my new home waited, sunlight spilling through its open doorway like a quiet kind of freedom. Mornings came softer now. The light slipped through the lace curtains of my new cottage, brushing the walls pale gold. I woke without rush, brewed a single cup of coffee, and carried it out to the porch. From there, the view was almost the same as before. Same street, same magnolia tree, but everything felt different. The old house stood across the road, its shutters closed against the sun. Sometimes I saw Morel watering the front garden in her robe, her belly round beneath the fabric. She looked tired already, her movements brisk, distracted. Keaton left early most days, his car pulling away before the light fully touched the porch. I could sense the distance between them, even from here, though I took no satisfaction in it. Instead, I turned my attention to the small patch of soil along my walkway. The herbs I'd planted, rosemary, mint, and thyme, had begun to sprout in thin green lines. I knelt to pull a few weeds, humming an old hymn Leon used to play on Sundays. Peace, I was learning, didn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it crept in quietly, filling the spaces left by hurt. When I finished, I wiped my hands on my apron and looked up. Morel stood by the fence, pretending to adjust the mail flag, but glancing toward me. Our eyes met for a brief moment, hers uncertain, mine steady. I raised my hand, gave a small wave, and said simply, "Good morning." She hesitated, then nodded before turning back inside. I sat down on the porch steps, letting the warmth of the cup seep into my palms. Across the street, the wind rattled the shutters of my old home, a soft reminder that I no longer belonged there. I sipped my coffee and watched the day unfold, neighbors walking dogs, the postman stopping by, the magnolia leaves shimmering in the sunlight. Peace, it turned out, didn't need an apology. It only needed room to breathe. By late summer, the magnolia blossoms had fallen, leaving only their waxy leaves and the hum of cicadas thick in the air. From my porch, I could see the changes across the street. The shutters on the old house had faded faster than they should have, and the front steps had begun to tilt just slightly, a slow surrender to time and wait. Keaton no longer waved when he left in the mornings. Some days he didn't leave at all. I'd see him pacing the porch, phone pressed to his ear, shoulders tight, his voice clipped with frustration. Morel carried the baby now, a soft bundle in her arms, but her smile, once so polished, had thinned to a line. The bills had come due in more ways than one. It started with the taxes. Savannah's property rates had climbed that year, and Keaton hadn't planned for it. Then one of his design clients pulled out, taking with them the cushion he'd relied on. Morel had cut her hours at work since the birth, and soon small tensions began to echo through their walls, the kind that grow louder when love is tired. One afternoon, as I watered my herbs, their argument carried through the open windows. Morel's voice cracked with exhaustion. "I told you we shouldn't have taken this house. We could have rented something smaller." Keaton said nothing for a long time, and when he finally did, his voice was low, almost breaking. "She trusted me, and I threw her out of her own home." The words reached me like a gust of wind, stirring the quiet around me. I turned off the hose and stood still, the scent of wet earth rising from the ground. Inside my cottage, the air was steady, the walls unscarred, the floors creaked with familiarity, but not complaint. I didn't feel triumph, only a soft ache, the kind that comes from knowing some lessons arrive later than we wish. That evening, I lit a small lamp by the window. Across the street, their lights flickered once, then dimmed. I whispered a prayer neither of them could hear and let the quiet return. Rain had been falling since afternoon, a soft, steady rhythm against the porch roof. I was reading by lamplight when I heard it a knock, hesitant at first, then firmer. When I opened the door, Keaton stood there, soaked to the bone, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "Mom," he said, voice trembling, "I'm sorry." For a long moment, we just stood there, the rain filling the silence between us. He looked smaller somehow, Not the man who had once shouted across the dinner table, but the boy who used to run home crying when life stung him too sharply. I stepped aside. "Come in before you catch cold." He obeyed without a word. Dripping onto the mat, I handed him a towel, then poured 2 cups of tea, the kind he used to drink when he stayed up studying. He stared at the steam as if it might tell him what to say next. "I shouldn't have spoken to you like that," he began. "I thought I was protecting my family, being responsible, but I was scared. Mom. Scared I wouldn't be enough for them." His hands shook slightly when he reached for the cup. I didn't know how to ask for help without feeling weak. I listened, saying nothing. The clock on the mantel ticked softly behind us. When he finally looked up, there was no pride left, only exhaustion. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Keaton," I said, "I forgave you the moment I walked out that door, but forgiveness isn't a key to the past. It's a doorway to grow from." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Love doesn't mean moving back in," I added gently. "It means learning to stand on your own and letting others do the same." He exhaled, a sound somewhere between relief and grief. Outside, thunder rolled over the river. I stood and handed him his coat. When he left, he paused under the porch light, looking back just once. I closed the door softly, the scent of rain lingering like something half-healed, half-remembered. Spring came back to Savannah in a hush of green. The magnolia tree outside my window bloomed again, its branches heavy with white petals that scattered across the walkway like confetti. The air smelled of rain and jasmine, and the world, for once, seemed to move at the right pace. Every evening, I lit the porch light, a small habit that became a quiet promise to myself. From the cottage steps, I could see the house across the street, its windows warm again. Morel sometimes stood there on the porch, rocking the baby in her arms. Keaton would wave, shyly at first, as if testing whether forgiveness still held its shape. I always waved back. They began visiting on Sundays, never announced but always welcome. Morel brought fresh bread, her smile softer now, humbled by sleepless nights and new beginnings. Keaton carried the baby, a boy with Leon's eyes and my stubborn chin. The first time I held him, his tiny hand wrapped around my finger and stilled something that had been restless in me for months. We didn't talk about the past anymore. There was no need. The silence between us had changed. It was no longer sharp, but full of understanding. Keaton sometimes stayed behind after Morel went home, helping me fix the gate or trim the rose bushes. He'd glance at the cottage, then back at me, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You did all right, Mom," he said once. I only nodded. That night, after they left, I walked inside and opened the small box I'd kept near the mantel. Inside was Leon's old brass key, smooth from years of use. I took it to the door and hung it on the hook he'd carved so long ago, the one engraved with a single word, home. The porch light glowed steady behind me as I whispered into the quiet. Love built this family. Boundaries keep it standing. Outside, the magnolia petals drifted down through the light, soft as forgiveness.